Good afternoon and welcome to Dorset Council's Licensing Subcommittee. Sorry for the delay in opening the meeting this afternoon. Before I go to the formal agenda items, if I can just get our fellow councillors to introduce themselves. My name's Councillor Emma Parker and I represent Puddletown and Lower Winterbourne.
My name's Derek Beer and I represent Shaftesbury.
And I'm Councillor Les Fry, representing Dorchester West.
Thank you, councillors. Okay, can I have an election for chairman for this hearing this afternoon, please?
I propose yourself.
I'll second yourself, Councillor Parker.
Thank you, councillors. Do we have any apologies?
Apologies for absence received from Councillors Sarah Williams and Paul Harrison, substituted by Councillors Les Fry and Derek Beer.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any declarations of interest for this application this afternoon?
No, Chairman.
No, Chairman.
Do we have any urgent items?
There are no urgent items. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And then that brings us on, and we're here this afternoon for the new premises licence application for Baps and Pitter, and that's 50 St Mary Street in Weymouth, Dorset. What I would now do is go around the room in order so everybody can introduce themselves and I can ensure that I've got everybody on my list who is due to speak. So I will start with our Democratic Services officers.
Democratic Services, John Miles. I'll be taking the minutes for this meeting. Thank you.
And our legal representative.
Hello, I'm Phil Crowther. I'm the subcommittee's legal advisor.
Our licensing officer.
I'm Catherine Miller, Senior Licensing Officer and Report Author.
And I will now go to the applicant.
Good afternoon, Ma'am and your colleagues. I'm Philip Day from Lacey Solicitors. I'm here to represent the applicant. The applicant is Mr. Osman Taniel, who sits to my far right, but his son, Emra, is also here. The two of them will be running this business together. Mr. Osman Taniel's English is not perfect, despite the fact he's been living here for 40 plus years. So that's the other reason that Emra is here as well.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and thank you for attending. I will now move on to our representation that we have from Dorset Police.
Yes, John Bean representing Dorset Police.
Thank you. And I will now move on to those that have made a representation for this application this afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm the representative for the community group, Respect Weymouth North Harbourside. Nigel Shearing.
Good afternoon. My name is Mehdi Rezai. I'm the landlord of number 46 and 59 St Mary Street.
Thank you. And I believe we have a representative from Weymouth Town Council.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Councillor Luke Wakeling and I'm representing Weymouth Town Council's Planning and Licensing Committee.
Thank you very much, and that's good because that's everybody that I've got on my list. So thank you, and thank you all for attending this afternoon. Right, I will now move over to Catherine. And Catherine, if you could please outline the report that we have.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. This hearing is to consider a new premises licence for Baps and Pitters, 50 St Mary Street, Weymouth. The application is for late night refreshment indoors, Sunday to Thursday, 2300 hours to 0300 hours. Friday and Saturday, 2300 to 0400 hours. Food served for consumption on the premises before 2300 hours is takeaway and is takeaway only after 2300 hours. The applicant and plan are attached to Appendix 1. There was one representation received from Dorset Police and they requested that the following condition be added to the licence if it were to be granted. When the premises are open for licensable activities, after midnight there should be 2 SIA door staff employed until the premises are closed and clear of all patrons. Their representation can be found at Appendix 2. There were no other representations received from any of the local responsible authorities. There were 2 relevant representations received from the ward member and Weymouth Town Council based on the prevention of crime and disorder and prevention of public nuisance, and their representations can be found at Appendix 3. There were 5 relevant representations received from members of the public under the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety and prevention of public nuisance, and their comments can be found at Appendix 4. The solicitor for the applicant has produced a written submission which contains several documents, one of which is a new set of proposed conditions that may be added to the licence if it were to be granted. The solicitor has also offered amended hours for the late night refreshment and opening to Sunday to Thursday, 2300 hours to 0100 hours. Friday and Saturday, 2300 to 0400 hours, and Sundays falling on bank holiday weekends, 2300 to 0300 hours. The opening hours are amended to Sunday to Thursday, 2300 to 01, Friday and Saturday, 2300 to 0400 hours, and Sundays falling on bank holiday weekends, 2300 to 0300 hours. The full submission from the applicant's solicitor can be found at Appendix 5. The options available to members are to grant the licence subject to such conditions as the authority considers appropriate for the promotion of the licence and objectives and the mandatory conditions, to exclude from the scope of the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates, refuse to specify a person in the licence as the designated premises supervisor, or reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for Catherine?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Do you have any questions for Catherine with regards to the report?
No, thank you, Mum.
Do you have any questions for Catherine with regards to the report? Okay. Do you have any questions for Catherine with regards to the report? Okay, thank you. Now, as Catherine has opened the report and made an outline, what I want to do is, because I'm mindful that there are some photos that are being asked whether we view them or not, what I'd like to do now is just adjourn for 5 minutes so that we can make the decision as to see whether the pictures are going to be relevant for us to make our decision. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Obviously mindful that we've got a representation from Weymouth Town Council, and that's Luke Wakeling. And obviously, Luke, you're not going to be obviously not be able to hand you a copy of this picture. I'm happy to hold the picture up, but I'm not sure that you're going to get much of a view of it. But what it is, it's the corner of St Mary Street, and it's got a list of addresses attached to it. Are you happy with that?
Yes, I can see. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great. Mr. Day.
Thank you, Ma'am. It's a bit difficult to know where to begin with this one. I came into this rather late in the day. The original application was drafted by a chap who was, in fact, I believe, an architect. And with the greatest respect to them, it could have been rather better in more ways than one. So my starting point with regard to that, and also having regard to the representations that had been made, particularly by members of the public, was to go through that and to try and make sense of it, and to look towards putting something forward that was hopefully more acceptable than the original application. You will see the process that I went through towards the end of your agenda papers, because the original version of that is included, but also the end result, which you can see, bear with me whilst I find the right page, because there's so many documents here, is at page 75. I don't think that I need to take you through all of that, and it is largely duplicated in Ms. Miller's report as well, as to what it is that is now being proposed. Can I draw your attention at this stage in particular to a condition that we have proposed with regard to SIA door staff? Because in effect, what we are suggesting now is that there should be a condition that is attached to the licence to the effect that there should be there should be a risk assessment with regard to the deployment of door staff. That has to be in writing, and it has to determine whether or not it's appropriate to deploy SIA registered door staff on any particular days or times, and then door staff shall be deployed as may be determined by the outcome of the risk assessment. To be open and transparent, I did have a word with Mr. Bean before this hearing commenced to ask if the police had any view about that, to which the answer was, as I'm sure he will confirm, that no, they want to have the condition that is referred to in the officer's report. In other words, on any day that is open late, they have to have at least 2 door supervisors. That, I think, is the only concern that the police have, and I address that first because that is the only responsible authority representation that you have before you. In the context of this immediate area, there are a number of other licensed premises, and you will see that there is a list of those that I produced and which your officers has also checked. And that, for example, includes the Golden Lion pub, which is helpfully just on the very left-hand side of the photograph that has just been handed in. And if you look at page 90 of the agenda papers, you will see that those premises are licensed until 2 a.m. Mondays to Thursdays, 3 a.m. Fridays, Saturdays, and until 1 a.m. On Sundays. I'm not going to go through the whole list of other premises in this locality, but the fact of the matter is that very few of them have any requirement to have door staff and don't deploy. Perhaps most significantly of all is that but a few doors away from the application premises is Jay's Kebabs at 54 St Thomas Street, DT480Q, referred to on page 91. That has a late-night refreshment licence only, no alcohol, but that is until 4 o'clock, 365 days of the year, so rather more than we've applied for. That licence was fairly recently granted, although at the time it didn't have planning consent, but I gather that's now been sorted out as well. But there is no condition that they have any door staff whatsoever. And indeed, there was no representation from the police or anyone else requiring or asking for door staff to be deployed at those premises. And one is forced to wonder why it is that the request has been made for the application premises rather than anywhere else in the wider locality. If there is a problem, then the risk assessment will address it. And if there is a problem and the risk assessment doesn't address it, then I have no doubt whatsoever that we'll be back before you on an application to review the licence. And I ask that you bear that in mind. I think you should also please bear in mind the size of these premises and the number of people that are likely to use it. And with regard to that, there is, as I pointed out in my written submission, something of a discrepancy between what's being suggested by the Town Council and local residents and what has been suggested by the police. Now, the representation from the police doesn't specifically address the two matters that I'm now going to turn to. And the reason for that is this. When the planning application was submitted in respect of these premises, the police did make a comment, and again, I've included that within the papers. Now, whatever other failings there may have been when the application was drafted, the application took into account the comments that had been made by the police with regard to the planning application, particularly with regard to the toilet, that it should be closed, and that is a condition that has been offered from day one of this application after 10:30 p.m. The local residents want the toilet to be open all of the time. Which is it to be? The local residents want a double lobby. The police were suggesting that the lobby be removed. The plan layout drawing of the premises shows a double lobby. However, an application has been submitted for permission to remove the inner door if, at the end of the day, it is considered that the best thing to do is to not have the inner door. Then there is the application planning consent to do it. If that consent is granted, then it is a permission to do it. It is not a requirement to do it, if you get my drift. So by doing that, they're keeping their options open. The other point of difference is with regard to basically the use of the premises, because what the police are saying is, well, we want it as a takeaway. We don't want people sitting in there late at night and all the rest of it. And that is what the application is for, a takeaway late at night. Incidentally, it could do deliveries, but there is no current intention or plan to do deliveries, particularly late at night, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But the local residents effectively wanted to operate as a cafe with nobody eating other than inside the premises. Now, I would respectfully suggest that with regard to matters of crime and disorder in particular, and that is what these things are principally related to, but also with regard to matters of public nuisance, noise from the premises in particular, that it is appropriate that you take your lead from the responsible authorities whose task it is to advise you with regard to these matters. And it may be at an appropriate time that we can ask Mr. Bean for his views, specifically on whether the toilet should be open, whether people should be required to sit in, other little things like whether the tables and chairs should be affixed to the floor if at all possible. Again, that was something that was proposed because in response to the planning application, that was what a colleague from the police requested. I've included all of those reports there. I can take you to them if necessary, but I imagine you've read all of the papers, all 100 and something pages, and I'm not going to take up time unnecessarily with regard to all of that. So what we're then left with, if you're minded to grant this application in terms of the proposed SIA condition, is a situation where these premises would be the only ones that have door staff. They are small premises. To require 2 door staff, frankly, is going to be commercially unviable. It won't work. It won't happen because the trade from premises such as this simply would not justify the significant expense of employing 2 SIA registered door staff throughout the later hours from 11 p.m. or whatever. So I would ask you to come to the conclusion that with regard to that, it is a condition that it is not appropriate for you to attach to this licence, and at the risk of repeating myself, because you have the comfort of knowing that there is a condition requiring the risk assessment. You also have the comfort of knowing that other premises in this locality that are open until way after midnight and who don't have door staff, but whom you may think are of a higher risk because they are supplying alcohol in particular. There are, as far as I'm aware, and of course I don't have access to all the police and council records, but nobody has suggested that anywhere else has actually had any sort of problem with regard to that. As far as the applicants are concerned, it's not something for you to be concerned with as to their suitability or anything like that, but you should be aware that they do operate other premises in Weymouth that are open until 4 o'clock in the morning. They do deliveries, but not after 11 o'clock at night, and they have had absolutely no problems, no incidents of any description there. Can I go back then, please, to the issue of cumulative impact? The problem with late-night refreshment houses tends to be that people use them late at night because they've been out on the town, visiting bars, clubs, nightclubs, whatever, and then want to grab something to eat before they go home. I think there are 2 points that need to be made about that in the context of cumulative impact. The first is that unlike maybe a new licensed venue or nightclub or whatever, opening another takeaway is not going to bring people into town that aren't already there. People aren't suddenly going to come into Weymouth town centre at 2 o'clock in the morning simply because they want to take away from Babson Peter. That's fanciful, that's not going to happen. What is going to happen is this, that given that you have a finite number of people, if you provide them with another outlet, quite apart from giving them choice, it also means that the number of people visiting other premises are inevitably reduced. We all know that the problems associated with late night takeaways tends to be people queuing, people waiting, particularly if they've had a drink. If you do something to shorten the queues, then A, those in the queue get served faster, and B, as there are fewer people in the queue, the potential for friction between people in the queue, people waiting outside, is diminished. In other words, what you're actually doing is promoting the licensing objectives, particularly prevention of crime and disorder, and also public nuisance, because the fewer people in any particular place, then the less likely they're going to fall out with each other. The shorter they're there, the less likely that the noise they're going to make is going to disturb people and the like. I ought to mention that the planning officer is not somebody who has made a representation with regard to this application. For that reason, I've included, and planning and licensing are different, but you are entitled to take into account what was said with regard to the planning application. And this is on page 106. It is considered that the use as a takeaway would maintain an appropriate mix of town centre uses, which would benefit the vitality and viability of the town centre. As there are a variety of uses in the vicinity of the premises, the use as a takeaway would not result in a concentration of the same use in a small area of the town centre, and therefore not necessarily be the cause of antisocial behaviour. The principle of the use of the premises as a takeaway and the upgrade and repair of the listed building is acceptable and in accordance with policies, etc. And although the planning application did suggest restrictions on operating hours, which are now replicated in the licensing application after I amended it, the planning officer in the report made it clear that they didn't think that there was any need to attach any condition to the planning limiting the hours. And if you look at both the planning consent itself and the listed building consent, you will see that there are no such conditions attached to either. So you're left in a situation whereby the benefit of allowing these premises to open is that it's going to improve the vitality of the immediate area. In my respectful submission, it will go some way towards promoting the licensing objectives for the reasons that I've already mentioned, and in particular, public nuisance and crime and disorder. There is no suggestion from anywhere that the licensing objective of protecting children from harm is going to be engaged here. And I would respectfully suggest that there is no evidence that the public safety licensing objective would be undermined in any which way, shape or form. I think you have to have regard to the locality, of course you do. I invite you to attach weight to the lack of evidence that granting a 4 a.m. licence not so very long ago, a few doors away from these premises, has actually done anything to cause any problem whatsoever. And for those reasons, I do invite you to grant this application subject to the amended hours and conditions that I have now proposed on behalf of Mr. Tymel and now his son as well. There's 104 pages of this. 16 or so pages purport to show incidents of crime in the locality. There are lies, damn lies, and statistics, and I think one has to be very, very careful with regard to this. It doesn't tell you at what time of day any of these incidents occurred. It doesn't tell you to what extent any of these incidents were alcohol related. It doesn't tell you whether any of these incidents were related to late night takeaways or anything of that nature. And I suspect, and I hope Mr. Bean will in due course be able to confirm, that these statistics do not necessarily accord with official police statistics that are used to justify a cumulative impact assessment and then the adoption of a cumulative impact policy. I would, with the greatest respect to those who produced, and no doubt took an awful lot of time to do it, all of these pretty pictures that are around page 60 of the, sorry, they start on page 61, in fact. It's not going to help you, I would respectfully suggest, in reaching a decision here. I have not covered absolutely everything. I have not taken you to specific documents such as the planning officer's report, the police report with regard to the planning application and the like. But I trust that that is sufficient. But I am here, as are my clients, to answer any questions that you, and your colleagues may have, and are here to try and help you reach a decision. But we invite you to grant the application as now amended. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for that comprehensive addition to the report. That's been very helpful. Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions?
Yes, please. Thank you very much for your report, as the chairman has said, and thank you for outlining your view on all of the things that have been put before us. Obviously, years of experience tell us that, as you have said, that people have visited nightclubs, they visited pubs, and they come out, they need a bit of refreshment before they go home because you're hungry. You probably need the loo as well, and such like. We've heard about that the reports may not be kind to you, perhaps, but what plans or what thoughts might you have? I don't think I've heard that from you, that the applicants might have to deal with the effects of the business, which we understand there will be people arriving a bit noisy. What consideration might you have given to the residents who live above and round about, and what sort of plans would you have in place to deal with unsociable activities to minimise the effect on those residents? Have you thought that through? Would you perhaps outline that for me? Thank you.
The short answer to that is yes. The first thing is staffing levels. These are small premises, but the intention is that there should be 3 full-time and 1 part-time member of staff, and they would be there. You know, bearing in mind the size of these premises, that's a lot of staff for small premises. That they would be there, tasked with making sure that their customers do not cause a problem. And it is really as simple and straightforward as that. And if there is ever any issue, then the entire question of whether it's appropriate to have somebody who is SIA badged on the door or immediately outside or whatever would be readdressed. And the condition that we've proposed with regard to the risk assessment requires that to happen. Until the premises are open and are trading, let's be blunt about it, we don't know what the demand is going to be. Obviously, if Emma and Rosman here didn't think that there would be a demand for it, and demand is not something that you're allowed to consider, then they wouldn't be putting this forward as a commercial proposition. But it is a question almost of waiting to see what happens and how it beds down, whether or not there are any issues. But I point to the fact that, you know, there is the pub opposite, and you've got all these other premises that are open late. You've got the other one that was recently granted a few doors away, 4 a.m. licence, 365 days a year. That doesn't seem to have caused any issues or problems. Is there any reason to think that this one would be any different, particularly having regard to the views of the planning officer after extensive consultation and so on? And to an extent, I pray and aid the police. They don't object to it being open or whatever. The only issue is whether we start off with having SIA or whether we start off with risk assessing it and then looking to see what happens. That's the only difference, I think, between us and the police.
Thank you. It would have been comforting for me to know that you might have, that those involved might have thought about the people that live around about and how you might have dealt with them, and perhaps you might have even consulted them. I hear what you say about the other premises and how it might be reduced. I just wondered, it would have been comforting to know that you had, in part of your thinking, thought through of the effect of the people who live above and round about. But I understand what you're saying.
Also make the point here that it was a condition of the planning that an acoustic report be prepared. I haven't troubled to include that, although I had a copy of it. That has already been done, and as far as the acoustic aspect of it is concerned, there is no reason to suppose that any of the upstairs residents in particular will be disturbed by anything that happens downstairs in these premises. And there's no, as far as noise is concerned, there is nothing from environmental health officers from whom you take your lead on noise. A consultation with something like this is always extremely difficult because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. The process set out in the Licensing Act makes it very clear that when you put the application in, you have to put your blue notices up, you have to put your advert in the newspaper, and there is then the statutory 28 days consultation process. Now, to an extent, I take the blame here, if you like, but at the end of the consultation period, and even during it, I take a step back from the trees and look at the shape of the wood. If it is the case that you only have 2 or 3 people who have made representation, then with the good assistance and offices of your licensing officers, I would normally make an approach to those individuals or whatever to talk to them and to see what it is that we can do to satisfy and allay their fears. Once you get more than 4 or 5 people putting in representations, it is inevitable that you're going to end up at a hearing because you will never persuade all of them to withdraw their representations. And in those circumstances, we simply rely on the good sense of you and your fellow councillors when we come to a hearing to hear what everybody has to say and to come to a decision. And, you know, we also have in mind, for example, that the Town Council, they didn't have any problem at all with the planning application, but have then, for reasons which I no doubt will be explained, have decided it appropriate to make a representation with regard to the licensing application. You know, licensing and planning are different. In terms of public nuisance, however, the test under licensing is that it needs to be a public nuisance. The test under planning is rather broader. It's loss of amenity, and you can have a loss of amenity when something happens that falls far short of a public nuisance. So again, I pray the planning decision in aid as bolstering my argument that to grant this application would not undermine the licensing objectives and that in those circumstances, the cumulative impact policy, you have good reason to be satisfied that the presumption of refusal has been rebutted by us.
Thing from me, I won't hog this, I promise you. Would you have considered something along the lines of a communication process between the people who live above, sort of with a relevant phone number to come down and say, look, this is really a bit too much this evening, would you sort that out? Something along those lines can be quite comforting to know that you had thought about it. The fact that the representations have been made does flag up an issue, and it's something important that we should shake down and talk about. Thank you.
I'm going to get Emma to answer that, but if you think it appropriate to make a telephone number available on the website or whatever it is that people can make a complaint to, then we have, I'm sure, no difficulty with agreeing a condition along those lines.
Hello. In regards to people living above me, when I got the acoustic reports, they did say that for people to be disturbed, there's a certain amount of decimal of sound. And even though they said that it wouldn't be enough for someone, I still included in my planning to have a soundproof ceiling. So just for the residents to be even more, so I've managed to lower the decimals even more. So I've done that bit for the residents as well that live above me. And anytime they have a problem, they can contact me and I can obviously communicate with them and see how we can, but with the acoustic report, I did do a full soundproof ceiling so that the noise downstairs wouldn't go upstairs. Thank you.
Mr Day, thank you very much. It's Councillor Les Fry, Dorchester West. This situation, what is your views on the leaving the toilets open? I'm conscious that many of your customers will come with intoxication, alcohol on board, come out into the fresh air, cold air. The urge might take them, and I'm not sure where the nearest public toilet is after that.
I confess that I'm not so intimately familiar with this part of Weymouth that I can tell you where the public toilets are, but I'm sure there are numerous people here who are. See, this is part of the problem. The police have one view, local residents have a different view. And my personal view, as you ask me, is that we should go along with the police. The police have a concern that, you know, people can go into the toilet and not use the toilets for the purposes for which they're intended, but for other maybe nefarious uses and so on. You can't put CCTV in a toilet, well, you can, but it's not going to go down very well, to put it mildly. And in fact, it's a condition that we have CCTV, but not in the toilets. It's a difficult one. But again, my personal view is that one should go along with the advice from the police, which is why the condition was offered and remains on the table. If you decide that's not appropriate, then that is a matter for you. But I would go along with the view that's been expressed by the police, that it's not appropriate for them to be open. There is also the problem that if it is then well known that there is a public toilet in there, then it is inevitable that you're going to get people coming in who have absolutely no intention whatsoever of having any food or anything like that. They're just going to use the loo. And I'm sure, you know, we've all seen public houses and so on with a big sign on the front door, you know, toilets of use of customers only. So, yeah, I mean, you can cut it either way, but my personal view is that you should go along with the attitude of the police and look to the police for guidance on that.
A comment's been made about eating in or eating out, taking away. Your views on that, please? I'm conscious that people will collect their food, whatever they do. They may wander up the street shouting and that, and the impact of the food on their digestive system and their behaviour, if consumed, might be better than if they're walking along eating as they go.
Right, public health isn't a licensing objective, but the health authority is now a statutory consultee. Again, I go back to looking at the shape of the wood rather than the trees. as your colleague, Sir, mentioned earlier, people do get the munchies, as it were, after they've had a drink or two. And there is also very much a perception that if you put some food in your stomach, you're going to sober up and so on and so forth. And therefore, it is a good thing. But looking at the wood rather than the trees, there are going to be a finite number of people who are doing that. They're already using takeaways. I don't think that it's a good idea with premises this size, and you've seen the plan. The plan shows 16 covers, 4 tables, 4 small tables with 4 small chairs. If you have people sitting in there and eating, and you have other people coming in wanting a takeaway and so on, then I think that that is more likely to cause friction than anything else, and that it is better that you restrict the use of the premises effectively as a restaurant in the way that has been suggested, rather than go the direct opposite and make it sit-in only. There is also, frankly, the commercial consideration. And again, entirely accept that you're not concerned about the commercial realities or anything like that. These premises would not survive as a sit-in restaurant with a mere 16 covers. It simply wouldn't pay. It's not a practical proposition. And if that were to be a condition, then quite frankly, you may as well refuse the license.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. Most of my questions were covered off in the addition that you made to the report. So thank you. Do you have any questions at the moment? No. Okay. Catherine, do you have any questions? John, do you have any questions? No. Okay. Thank you. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. You're talking about the soundproofing. I appreciate you're going to be soundproofing within the floor of above the premises. That is all well and good, which would obviously rectify the sounds going up to the properties above. But outside is the main problem where the customers would be coming. The building is, I'm pretty sure it's a listed building, so it's got single glazed windows all the way around it, so all the sound would come out for a start. And people which they go to buy a takeaway, some of them, they don't want any takeaway, so they'll wait outside for their friends to get a takeaway. So that creates a noise as it is. So what exactly would you be doing to rectify that? But I can't see there is any solution, because you can't, direct people outside to move along, because they won't do that. And as far as for the double doors, you've got a lobby in between. I don't think the lobby would work, although it would protect the sound, but there is no way the takeaways would have 2 doors shut and have the customers in there. It won't work. So. And the door you've got, the outside door, opens inwards, and you won't even have that one shut, because the customers won't be able to come in, because there's customers going out at the same time. If you go to any takeaways, all the takeaways, their doors are all wide open to allow the customers to go in and out. And also for fire risk, you need for the customers to be able to go out, and you can't have the door shutting inwards. For them to go out, they'll be locked inside. So the door has got to be opening actually outside for them to escape out, just in case there's a fire.
I'm not actually sure what the question was. If we're going to talk about things like...
As a question, I believe the question was about people hanging around outside that will be waiting for friends that don't particularly want to go in and get food, and how you are potentially going to keep people quiet when they're leaving your premises. I would put that as one question. The next question was regards to the double lobby, but it's to be removed anyway, the double lobby. And the fact is, what will be the process on the ingress egress of people with the door constantly? Sounds like it could be quite busy, constantly opening and closing. I would say that was the second question. Am I correct in that? Yeah. Okay. So I put it out as two questions.
Let me deal with the second one first, if I may. Right. The first thing about that is that the police, and again, the neighbours, have different views. And we're happy to go along with whichever one prevails in your opinion. And I've already mentioned that a separate planning application has been put in so that if the view is there should only be the one door, then they can do that legitimately with the planning consent. The second aspect of that was with regard to the Fire Authority. Fire Authority are a statutory consultee. I think the only observation that they have made is the one that they tend always to make, namely that you are under a statutory duty to carry out a fire risk assessment that's got to be done by a competent person, and then you must implement the outcome of that. So that's not an issue that I think that you need to be troubled with at all today. As for people outside and all the rest of it, the fact of the matter is that there is a pub opposite that's open until 3 o'clock on Friday and Saturday nights. There is another recently granted late night takeaway, but a few doors away, open until 4 a.m. And there are numerous other premises, as you can see from the schedule that's been produced with the opening hours and so on and so forth. Two aspects with regard to that. I say again that if you give people an alternative, then the crowds outside or inside any one particular premises logically are going to be fewer. So looking at the wood and not the trees, the overall problem is going to be reduced. That's simply the way in which it works. People get served quicker, they've got less reason to hang around and be there for any length of time. The risk assessment has to take that into account, and if there is an issue with regard to it, then it may well become necessary or appropriate to deploy one or more door supervisors to do what they can to encourage people to go. Although when it comes to things like that, even an SIA-registered door supervisor has as much legal power to require people to move on as you or I do, ma'am. In other words, none. It is only the likes of the police who can compel that to happen. And again, the ultimate sanction is, if it causes a problem, then I have no doubt we'll be back before you on a review.
Thank you very much. Do you have any further questions? No? Okay. Mr. Shearing?
So the application itself is a risk assessment in a way. So from a resident and business perspective in the immediate area, it seems pretty obvious to us that public toileting will be an issue if there are no toilets available in the takeaway, and there are no public toilets available in the immediate area. And also in that risk assessment of the application, the risk of ASB in the pedestrianised area outside could easily be mitigated by providing seated eating in addition to takeaway or deliveries, because it seems obvious that if some people would like to eat inside and they've got a place to eat inside, they're not going to sit outside under people's homes or under their doors or on tables that are opposite the takeaway in the Golden Lion, which closes before the takeaway closes. And I guess what I'm trying to say is it doesn't feel like the risk assessment of the application has considered that. and it doesn't feel like you're being fair to residents or businesses in the immediate area. And why is there such reticence to have the toilet open to try and make it better for residents? And why is there such reticence to not enable eating within the premises, which there will be tables for, after 2300, so that you carry some of that risk of antisocial behaviour and public toileting, which is very upsetting for local residents. Why is there such reticence for that?
Thank you.
I deal with the public toilet. The police, in terms of the planning application, said this: public toilet is not overlooked, and access to it is gained via 2 swing doors. Unfortunately, public toilets bring their own issues of drug abuse and sometimes sexual assault, especially when people have been drinking and the toilets are not segregated. Solution: close them. People tend not to go into a takeaway in order to use their loo. And again, if these people are here already, if they've been out drinking and they didn't pay a visit before they left their hostelry, public house, bar, whatever, then we've already got that problem. It's not going to make things any worse. It's as simple and as straightforward as that. I think the rest of it I've already addressed in my submissions, and I won't repeat myself.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much. I'll now go to Luke, who we've got from the Town Council. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Ask John if he had questions. No? Okay. All good. Thank you. Right, I will now move on to our representation from Dorset Police, and that's John Bean. John, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Ma'am, I've heard what Mr Day has had to say. You're obviously fully aware of the stance by the police as regards the SIA door staff. That comes, as you will appreciate, from my email, not from me, but from people higher up in my organisation. We, obviously, as the Licensing Act says, are the guardians of crime and disorder. Experience tells us that where late-night refreshment and alcohol meet, there is inevitably, at some juncture, problems of crime and disorder. That can obviously be mitigated to a large extent, in this case, by the condition that has been proposed. And that would give not only comfort to the police, whose duties are stretched enough as it is without dealing with issues at licensed premises, but hopefully it would give some comfort to the residents that there would be trained people there who can deal with any issues of crime and disorder. I've obviously heard what Mr Day has said as regards a risk assessment. Unfortunately, a risk assessment is only a piece of paper. And a piece of paper won't deal with something at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And we would much rather the items were put in place now to prevent crime and disorder than to come back to you in 6 months' time and say, yeah, there have been incidents of crime and disorder. We do want a review of the premises to put on the licence, the conditions regarding door staff. So that is one stance. And the SIA door staff, apart from giving reassurance to the community, these are skilled people who can look after any safety situation. They're trained in first aid. A queue was mentioned. They would be able to manage that queue, and one would hope their authority would give them some power to maybe gently persuade people to move on if they felt they were a little bit rowdy or a little bit noisy. I would only say as well that we're dealing here with this application for this premises. We are not looking at any other premises and what time they are open till. what incidents they have brought. We are purely looking at this one. And it is in our belief that what we have proposed will prevent any issues coming from what is a busy Weymouth area, certainly where these premises are. As Mr. Day has said, we are close to a pub. There are some later night openings not too far away, which would, on the balance of probability, have its customers going out from there to have their late night refreshment. And as we know, they may be a little bit intoxicated. So what we are seeking here with this condition is to mitigate as far as we can any issues of crime and disorder that will actually come from Baps and Pitter. Just as it has been, I will just put this point in as well, as it has been mentioned, Jay's Kebabs, the recent application that has been mentioned, that was actually granted in May last year. So we're now 10 months down the line. So it isn't as though it was granted a couple of months ago. Okay. But everything there is what I've said. The wait and see option, it really doesn't apply. It needs to be dealt with. And that would be dealt with by the condition that we propose.
Thank you very much. Councillors, do you have any questions?
In my many years' experience as a ward councillor and living in a town centre, I have watched, and I've spoken about this at very high levels and low levels. I can understand the concerns about closing toilets. I hear all of that. I've tried to balance that in my own mind, and it never works, having looked out of my window and talked to residents and shopkeepers after they've left the pub at 3 o'clock, as we know, they go for a takeaway, and nature takes over. So I've witnessed for years, people urinating in shop doorways and shopkeepers complaining to me. It's a problem. I hear the problem of the assaults which may happen in toilets. I wonder what your own view is. How can we ever balance up the fors and against about what might happen in toilets to people really, really needing to use the loo in the night? Crikey, I do. And you either break the law or you get arrested for, it's difficult. And it is something that needs sorting, because to say to people, I nip into shops and say, can I use your loo, please, because it's important. I would hate to be told I can't because we've been told to close it by the police in case of sexual activity. Do you have a take on that, please?
Unfortunately, sir, no, I don't. I come from this angle as a police licensing officer, not a guardian of toilets. And as such, my stance is very much as is with this condition. If you have SIA registered door staff, they can deal with any issue at a premises, be those toilets open or closed. Please, may I use the loo? There is a door staff member at the door saying, no, you cannot. These are for the use of the patrons, as has been mentioned. Again, it is something which skilled SIA operatives can deal with, but unfortunately, I believe you will find that the issue of the toilets comes from a department which is not the licensing department. I'm coming from the area of the Licensing Act and issues of crime and disorder, public safety and public nuisance. And even though it's perhaps not my field, and I have dealt with this for quite a number of years, yes, SIA door staff can deal with any eventuality under any given circumstance, which is why we're seeking that condition on the licence.
Thank you. We have no further questions. Mr. Day, do you have any questions?
Yes, if I may. I was going to ask about the toilets, but I've been preempted, so I'm not going to go there. Can you just help us with the lobby? As a licensing officer, would you prefer to see 2 doors or 1, or are you not in a position to express a view? Sorry.
Mr. Day, as a police licensing officer, on that matter, I am not in a position to express an opinion. I would think that the opinion may well have come from one of my colleagues who were perhaps in the area of a crime prevention officer or an architectural liaison officer. And unfortunately, that is a field into which I've never dabbled.
Thank you for that. It was an answer that, frankly, I was anticipating, but the question had to be asked. The one premises locally, licensed until 4 a.m., Jay's Kebabs, 365 days a year. Thank you for pointing out that that was granted in May of last year. Okay, fairly recently. But as it's been granted in May, are you able to assist us with whether or not there have been any incidents of crime and disorder or any problems there that may have been avoided had they had door staff?
I would confirm that this morning I did some research in that area, and the police records, as far as I can determine, have shown no issues of crime and disorder at Jay's Kebabs from May until now. I would, though, like to point out that I did a little bit more research last week, which Mr. Day is fully aware of, and I found that, which I've shown to Mr. Day, which is the menu for Jay's Kebabs, which quite clearly at the bottom says 7 days a week, 5 p.m. to 11 p.m., which is possibly why we have had no issues of crime and disorder after 2,300 hours.
Mr. Bean, that leaflet refers to their delivery service, doesn't it? They're open until 4 a.m., but they only deliver up until 11 p.m., as is more often than not the case in Weymouth. And indeed, my client's other premises, they're open until 4 a.m. They don't deliver after 11.
I would just say that that is all I found in my research.
Can I just ask one more question? You're asking for a blanket condition, two SIA door staff, not one, every day that the premises are open beyond midnight, with no differentiation between Friday and Saturday nights, which I think probably the busiest nights of the week, as against, say, a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night where things are probably a little quieter. Can you put your hand on your heart and tell me that you believe that that is proportionate?
Following your amendment to the hours which the premises are going to be open, the police have had no issue with door staff from Sunday to Thursday because the premises will only be open until 1. It is on the Friday and the Saturday that the police have the concerns, which is why we have sought the condition, which I aren't going to reread it because you've obviously read it, that there should be 2 SIA door staff until 4 or until 3 on the bank holidays. The reason why you have 2 SIA door staff, which is often questioned, is that they can look after each other. That if one were to be involved in a dispute with maybe 2 or 3 drunken individuals, he has some backup there to deal with it. If he was there on his own, it would be of greater danger to just 1 SIA door staff to deal with a number of drunken customers than if it did have the backup, which is why invariably when we seek a door staff condition, we look for 2 SIA door staff as a minimum, basically not only for the safety of the public, but the safety of the member of SIA door staff as well.
Sorry, can I just clarify that? Page 47, your representation, when the premises are open for licensable activities after midnight, there shall be 2 SIA door staff employed until the premises are closed and cleared of all patrons. Are you now suggesting that that should be changed to only refer to Friday and Saturday nights, or are you sticking with what was said, you want that 365 days a year?
I believe that I did send you an email which said, I read through all the documents that you recently submitted regarding the application. Having reviewed the SIA condition, I would confirm that Sergeant Gosling's absence at the meeting this morning. I've discussed your proposal with Inspector Houston, the lead for our department. Inspector Houston is fully aware of the application and the police stance as noticed on the email confirming the police representation. Given the hours of operation have been amended, I would confirm that police would alter their position as to the SIA condition to the following. On Fridays and Saturdays when the premises are open until 4, and on Sundays falling on bank holiday weekends when the premises are open until 3, there shall be 2 SIA registered door staff employed at the premises from 2300 hours until the premises are closed and cleared of patrons. You will note that I've requested the SIA door staff commence duties from 2300 hours, as this is the commencement time for late night refreshment establishments under the Licensing Act. However, from a proactive management perspective, I hope your client would ensure the SIA door staff commence their duties at 2200 hours at the latest.
Right. I can explain that. I responded to that email, having taken instructions to further argue the case that we were putting forward, namely that it should be on a risk-assessed basis, full stop. That was not copied, and it has not been included in any of the agenda papers. What is now being suggested by the police, and I suggested it might be an idea if you have that in writing, is that it should only apply on, I think it was Friday and Saturday nights, when the premises are open until 4, or on the Sundays, bank holiday Sundays, until 3. But again, it's again different because page 47, where it's provided after midnight, they're now asking for it from 11 p.m. So in one sense, it's stricter than it was. In another sense, it's not as strict as it was. I'll address that further when I come to close.
Thank you. Do you have any further questions?
No, thank you, Mum.
If I may, I have a question, and it's just come with the unravelling of all of this, if that's okay. I don't want to get too bogged down in other premises. Like I said, we're here. This is a licence, and we take every licence on their own merit. But I just want to come back to the fact that you've already got a takeaway in Weymouth, and your hours at that one. Do you use those hours to the full potential there?
No, on the weekdays we close at 12, and Friday, Saturday, and bank holidays we close at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Thank you. What's those? And then I've got, yeah, okay. Mr. Shearing, do you have any questions for Mr. Bean?
If there was a condition in the licence that enabled the applicant to do the risk assessment on themselves, would the police be responsible for overseeing the quality of that risk assessment, or would it be left to the applicant?
It would depend what condition was placed on the licence as regards that risk assessment, and the wording thereof is all I would say.
Mr Wakeling, do you have any questions for John Bean?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Fry has a question for Catherine.
Catherine, have we had any issues or reports of problems at Jay's Kebabs or the applicant's other premises, please?
No, we have no reports of any incidents or any other happenings at those premises.
And you're aware of the applicant's other premises selling food, and no reports at this time of issues or problems?
No issues, and I believe the other applicant's premises does also have alcohol sales with it.
Yeah, can I just clarify that? That is true, but it's delivery only. It's not a pub. It's delivery only, the alcohol, and he holds a personal license. It's not a non-license or anything like that. It's purely incidental to food deliveries.
Where is the other premises, please?
Westham Road.
Okay, thank you. I will now move, bear with me a second. Oh, good. Okay, I will now move on to those that have made representations, and I will come first to Mr Shearing, who is here on behalf of Respect Weymouth. Mr Shearing, is there anything that you would like to add to what you've already submitted?
Sorry. Yeah, I have some notes. So I might, they're a bit scribbly, so I might jump around a little bit, but I would like to say a few bits, please. So we don't have anything further to add to the conditions that we presented in the representation. Regardless of how the statistics are looked at for crime and ASB in the area, I think it's pretty fair to say that this area is already challenged with serious crime, and also with crime that's not reported of a more petty nature, which the police are simply not interested in and can't respond to. The serious crime, if you believe the statistics, are more focused around antisocial behaviour and sexual assaults, and they are evidenced in the submissions of our appendices from well-established statistics from the police organisations. The police have already raised the risk of new flashpoints to the immediate area at planning, and the venues around this takeaway compared to the venues around other takeaways, including the applicant's other premises, are considerably different. The premises around this takeaway and this application are extremely diverse, with very different age groups, very different cultures, and flashpoints there, more than any other in the immediate, in the surrounding area, are likely to cause flashpoints, I believe. With regard to Jay's Kebabs and the other takeaways in the area, and the takeaway, the other takeaways of this applicant's premises, the circumstances around these are completely different to this area. I'll take the nearest one, for example, and perhaps consider the applicant's other premises in Westham Road and St Thomas Street for Jay's. There are considerable difference between St Thomas Street and St Mary's Street. This application lies in a pedestrianised area which is far more likely to encourage groups of people congregating to eat takeaway food in a non-pedestrian, far more likely to encourage groups of people congregating to eat takeaway food than in a non-pedestrianised area, such as those around Jays and Westham Road, which are public highways. They have normal paths. This application is in a pedestrianised area of a high crime spot in the CIA, which can be verified by police statistical data. This also is exacerbated by directly opposite the takeaway in the pedestrianised area are benches, probably four or five benches that are left out from the Golden Lion all night. So they will be left there, encouraging people to sit at benches in a pedestrianised area after the closing of the pub, because on the weekends, the takeaway will be open after the closing of the pub. Just up the road from this application building, in the same street, in the same pedestrianised area, it's worth noting that a former McDonald's in this pedestrianised street has now closed. No doubt the considerable problems related to ASB in the street outside this contributed to this decision. It should also be noted that this occurred whilst door staff were employed to try and manage this. And what we're trying to say is, even with door staff in a pedestrianised area, with intoxicated people, with surrounding diverse premises, the risk, we believe, is quite high, and it needs to be managed well. We would like to say that this application, we keep looking at and considering other applications and other buildings and other what people have and haven't done, other licence applications. And it is our understanding that all new licence applications must be considered on their merits and the circumstances of the application in question. So that speaks for itself. With regard to toileting, residents and businesses have tired of waking up to piles of vomit, excrement, and pools of urine outside their front doors. This was at its worst when a late-night takeaway in the immediate area, less than 50 metres away from this premises, was open in Maiden Street. And since closing, these problems have virtually disappeared. We urge the committee to consider the detrimental impacts of this. It is a significant and upsetting issue, and one that does not interest the police. They have far more serious matters to address, and they will not have the resources to deal with it. So if this matter isn't addressed and resolved at this application stage, residents and immediate businesses in the area no doubt will be left to mop up. There are no public toilets in the area during the requested open hours. So we believe that toilets really do need to be made available within the takeaway, and on a balance of probability and risk assessment that between what might happen inside in a managed premises compared to what might happen outside without them, it seems that the provision of toilets would be a very sensible way forward. I'd just like to note, it seems interesting that the applicants do not want intoxicated people within their own premises after 2300 for toileting or eating, but they are very happy to pass the foreseeable impacts of this under the licensing objectives to the local community. Considering the risk to the immediate area, it would seem a very fair requirement to provide sitting in, eating arrangements during all hours of opening, in addition to takeaway arrangements. We're not suggesting that it just has a sitting license only. I think we need to be careful not to be totally dependent or skewed on the balance of police statistics for serious crime and disorder. The reality is, on the ground, there is a significant amount of what I guess you would call petty crime, antisocial behaviour, public toileting, minor sex acts, and things that cause public nuisance to residents. And these aren't reported. And the reason they're not reported is because when the police are called, they don't warrant an attendance. So the ground truth is not just what you see at police statistics. The thing that really upsets people are probably the things that aren't reported, as we've mentioned. It is acknowledged the changes to the open times, and with CIA door staff requested by the police, and we support this especially for Friday, Saturday and bank holidays. And it seems very obvious that this would help to mitigate the risk of crime and nuisance immediately outside the building in the pedestrianised area, which we reiterate is not the same as any other takeaway that has been brought up by the applicant in this hearing. We believe this should be a conditioned requirement rather than be left to the outcome of a premises-led risk assessment, which has already demonstrated a lack of assessment in this application process to mitigate the risks to local businesses and residents in the immediate area. We would like to further add that all waste collections should be outside 2300 and 0700, not just bottles. And we accept that a licence can be enforced and we can seek a licence review if things don't work out. But experience has shown in this area particularly that it is much more effective to get things right at the application stage rather than after. And we would welcome a constructive relationship with the applicants should they choose to go down that route and work with the local community. Finally, it is hoped that the council is trying to make town centres more attractive to residential accommodation, considering the changing landscapes of the high street, and the decisions taken around this application will go a long way to supporting that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr. Shearing? Okay. I have no questions, thank you. Mr. Day, do you have any questions?
Yes, if I may. Could I refer you to page 59 of the agenda papers? I just want to clarify what your position is. As I understand it, you don't have a difficulty with the premises being open until 1 o'clock in the morning. Is that right? Oh, sorry.
So, is that okay? Shall I continue? I don't have that in front of me, so I can't refer to the specific wording. But I do. I can recall that in the representation, we certainly requested that the opening hours should be as they were proposed in the planning document, because in the application to the licensing for this late license, it felt misleading and things were trying to be extended. We did, at the time, seek a closing on a Sunday to 12 o'clock because there's not a lot going on around the area after 12 o'clock. We think that would be fair. But we also, on the back of the discussions that we've been having here, can see that the provision of conditioned CIAs in the highest risk periods would mitigate some of that opening time. I'm not sure I've answered your question there, but...
Yeah, that's just what I'm trying to establish where we're at now. The application has been amended so that the hours sought in the licensing application are the same as the hours that were talked about during the planning process, but not ultimately imposed. So am I right in thinking that, forget conditions for the moment, just as a matter of principle, you would be content with the premises being granted a license for the hours that are now being sought? I hear what you say about Sundays, but the additional hours were only for Sundays falling on a bank holiday weekend and not across the board on Sundays, and I accept what you say about Sundays being quiet. So is that your position to begin with?
The position of the group, the position of the group, you know, I can only represent the position of the group and the committee. And at the time of writing the representation, we objected to the licence because we didn't feel that the risks had been mitigated. And I guess it's up to our view is that we're here to represent what we presented at the representation for the committee to make a decision on the outcome of that. So I'm not going to say here whether I'm not in a place independently to speak and tell you whether we can accept that or not. I think that's up to the committee.
Entirely accept that it's up to the committee, which is why we're here in the first place. I can't ask every member of the group, obviously, because they're not here. You're the representative, and I was just trying to clarify just a couple of other small points and then one slightly bigger one. You would be happier if there was a dining-in facility, and you would be happier if the toilets were to be kept open. Is that right?
Yes, that's a fair comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then one final point. You talked about the benches opposite on the other side of the road here. This is quite a busy road, isn't it, where the application premises are situated? Well, part of it's pedestrianised, but you know, let's look at the picture. Yes, up there is pedestrianised, but that's on a road. What's opposite? Not the pub. Is there not a taxi rank opposite? Well, my instructions are that there is a taxi rank opposite, which operates until very late. And of course, people tend to gather at taxi ranks waiting for a taxi, and will no doubt make use of the benches that are there whilst they're waiting for a taxi to arrive.
I don't really know what you're trying to suggest. What I would also say opposite this takeaway is the Guildhall, and the Guildhall itself is an extremely active hotspot for antisocial behaviour, which is less than 20 yards away from the front door of this application.
I'm going to leave it at that.
Do you have any further questions, Mr. Day?
No, Ma'am, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Catherine, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
John, do you have any questions? Okay. Do you have any questions for Respect Weymouth? No? Luke, do you have any questions for Respect Weymouth? No? Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you for attending. Okay. Now I'll now move on to yourself. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Well, basically, I'm going to make it short. I mean, the whole idea of the town centre is all changed. The shops are, we're getting empty shops. So the government has always been encouraging us to, utilise the upper floors of the shops. And this is what we've been doing. And the paper I've given you just give you the rough idea of how, how many residential are in just that vicinity, which is a really good thing because everybody is utilizing the upper floors there. And by putting a takeaway there, late night takeaway, we all know how busy it gets, or we will get. I mean, all these years we've had West Ham Road, which is down the road, everybody, because there's a number of takeaways there, late takeaways there, and everybody just goes that way. And the police can control them even better because they're in one area, not scattered different areas. So if in the police point of view, I personally think it's easier to handle the takeaways which are in one area rather than allowing this, which is in a pedestrian area, to have a takeaway in there. We did have like it was mentioned before, we did have a takeaway which was on the other side of this takeaway, late night takeaway, and there was a lot of problem. And regarding the urinating in the streets, they were using the church passage, which is a few doors down, as a public toilet, which is obviously we don't want to encourage that because we want to encourage decent people living at their homes with the comfort and knowing that 10 o'clock things are going to slow down, it's going to be quieter, not expecting 3 o'clock in the morning, gang of men or ladies coming along there, shouting and screaming, waiting for their takeaways. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
They are frustrating, these microphones. Councillors, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
No questions, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Stay.
Mr. Day, do you have any questions?
Afraid so. Can you help us? You described yourself when you introduced yourself at the beginning of this meeting as a landlord. You own a number of freeholds in the area. How many of those operate as late-night takeaways? No, that wasn't the question. How many of the premises that you own as a landlord operate as late-night takeaways?
None.
Do you own Jake's Kebab? You don't own those premises? Okay. Right, sorry, I was contrary to my instructions, but there you are. Right, what is your connection with Jake's Kebab?
My wife does.
Would it be unfair of me to suggest that you have a certain, or rather your wife has a certain commercial interest in seeing this application either being refused or seriously restricted because it would provide competition?
No.
It wouldn't provide any competition? You're not at all concerned about any reduction in business if this were to be granted?
No, not really, because the competition would be if the gentleman, the applicant, opens up another takeaway, he'll be competing with himself as well, because he's got one just down the road.
I hear what's being said. Can you just give me one moment? Do you or a close member of your family have an interest in any other late-night venues, licensed premises in this locality? No? Okay, I hear what you say. Thank you.
Catherine, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions for no? Luke, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for attending this afternoon. Right, I will now move on to Luke Wakeling, who is joining us virtually, and Luke is here as a representative of Weymouth Town Council. Luke, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Thank you very much, Chair. If I could just add briefly, the Town Council's Planning and Licensing Committee considered this licensing application, and we are generally of the view that the availability of hot food and refreshment after 11 p.m. is a good thing. It adds value to the late night economy, and chips or similar help to sober people up, helps keep them quiet, provide something for them to do while they're waiting for a taxi. And an absence of food outlets, people might be more bored and cause more trouble in the evenings. So we're generally in favour of well-managed takeaways. We had 2 comments. We would like to see the retention of the inner door on the porch. We believe this will help to retain sound in the premises. I expect the outer door will probably be propped open whilst the premises is open, so the inner door therefore will form a sound trap. And so we'd like the committee to consider that, please. On the toilets, there has been a history of public toileting in this area, as we've heard from many people already this afternoon. We'd ask if this premises has a customer toilet, then it should be available to customers during the hours it's open and serving food and refreshment. We feel closing the toilet at 10 or 11 o'clock would potentially increase public nuisance, which is a licensing objective, and antisocial behaviour in the local area. This business being open and trading will lead to people pausing in this area outside or in the area, whereas currently they would just walk straight past to get to another place. So this will cause people to linger in the area, and we'd like the facility there. To add some context to that, the Town Council does have a set of public toilets nearby in Maiden Street, but these are unattended toilets. We don't have staff on duty at the site. Because they're unattended, we lock them up at night. Unattended facilities can get vandalised, etc., and can attract crime. Council toilets, as I'm sure the committee is aware, don't generate revenue. They are a cost and to taxpayers. We have a responsibility there to manage that cost to make sure we're not opening them at a time where they're going to be expensive to operate and attract a large amount of trouble. That's not the same situation as a customer toilet in a cafe. The paying customers are coming in, they're creating revenue for the cafe, there are staff on duty. So we believe that way a customer toilet, we're not asking them to provide a public toilet to everybody on the street, but a toilet for their own customers, we feel would be of a benefit to this business and reduce antisocial behaviour and public nuisance in the local area. Those are the Town Council's comments. If I can just comment on a few things that have been said so far. With respect to the SIA licensing, I have a lot of sympathy with the police saying they don't want to wait and see what happens. We know what happens when you wait and see. However, I will sort of add, from my point of view, Weymouth is a very seasonal town. The difference between the August bank holiday weekend and somewhere in January is chalk and cheese. So I have a lot of sympathy with the risk assessment requirement here. Your Friday in January is going to be very different to the August bank holiday, and there is this huge disparity in the trade. So I think I would really feel 2 SIA through the winter would make this business totally unviable. But obviously in the summer there is a much greater risk. So I think that's something I'll ask the committee to consider, please. The other comment I'd like to make is regarding the applicant solicitor's response. In there's a large list of other licensed premises in the local locality. There are some of these are quite out of date. One of them, 60 St Thomas Street, formerly Aya, closed 2 years ago. It was a boxing gym for over a year, not open late at night, and now it's become a clothing shop, so that's about 2 years old. As many people have mentioned, the McDonald's closed down last year. That's now fitted out as a shoe shop, shuts at 5 p.m. every day. That's now out of the equation. So we have lost some of these late night licenses permanently. Batida isn't open regularly anymore. I think it managed to do 2 days a week last summer, and it's been shut all winter. Chic has announced they're permanently closing later this month, and there's planning permission to build 6 dwellings on that site. So that's another one that, although is trading this week, I expect to be gone before the one you're considering opens. So a number of those premises are not trading anymore, or very shortly will close. And although many of them are licensed till quite late hours, very few of them are using them anymore. There has been a significant shift in the late night economy in the town centre as a whole in this area. I noticed on the list the Swan is licensed till 4 a.m. I don't recall that ever opening past 1. The Golden Lion is opposite this and is licensed till 3, but again, I don't recall that ever opening past 1 a.m. You've got the ones on the harbour side, the George and the Ship, they're licensed till 2, but they've become restaurants in the last decade, and they're closing at midnight at the latest, even in peak season. So Weymouth 10 years ago, there were the late night economy was a lot bigger. There was trouble. That's when the cumulative impact policy came in, and things have, over 10 years, things have changed significantly. So the direction of travel has been this earlier closing. We have far fewer late night venues. I think, to the best of my knowledge, the only one on that list that actually uses its full terminal hour is the Closet. I think every other premises on that list is shutting before its licensed hours are up. And that's a trend I think we'd like to see continue. We don't want to go back to 6 a.m. opening and people rolling around as the sun rises. We're quite happy that things have calmed down, and it is definitely a much more pleasant and safer experience in Weymouth in the evenings than it used to be. So we don't want to see licenses that push the boundary further. We want to see more new licensed premises within the current envelope, but we do acknowledge the need to offer variety and spread people out and give them something to occupy them after hours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, do you have any questions?
Councillor Wakeling, Les Fry here, Dorchester West. What's the situation? We've talked about the area opposite the Corner House 50 St Mary Street. Is there a taxi rank opposite that?
There is a taxi rank in St Thomas Street outside the Swan for Hackney carriages. In St Edmund Street, there is B Cars, which is a minicab office where you can have a taxi booked for you there. As has also been said, there is also the Guildhall opposite, which has been derelict. Unfortunately, that is used quite often there's either rough sleepers in there or people publicly urinating as well, which is directly opposite this premises.
So in short, there are people already queuing in that area there. And should this licence be granted for this eatery, it might mitigate some of the people queuing. They'll have something to do other than stop and gossip. They'll be eating otherwise.
Without speculating too much, yes, there are people in the vicinity, particularly in peak season. I believe B Cars does have an SIA on duty in peak season just to manage their queue and things, and they have a waiting area indoors as well.
Thank you. In relation to McDonald's, what sort of issues were there in the surrounding that one before it closed? Was there antisocial behaviour?
There was. That's undeniable. My personal opinion was McDonald's attracted a very young crowd. Even you had under 18-year-olds in there at 2 o'clock in the morning. They may have been drinking cider on the beach and then decided they wanted a milkshake. But it was a particularly the mix of clientele was not your typical late night kebab shop clientele. It was a very, very young crowd, some of whom were intoxicated who couldn't handle it, and it did lead to some quite serious problems in that area.
So what you're saying is any issues outside McDonald's are not comparable with other areas of Weymouth Town Centre where licensed premises people are leaving?
My personal opinion is McDonald's created quite a unique set of circumstances, and it was a different clientele to that we see at either the ones on Western Road or at Jay's Kebab, or other. They don't attract the same clientele that McDonald's did. It's partly due to the fact the lack of facilities for youth in the town. There isn't much for them to do. So, as I'm sure all of you are aware from all your respective towns and villages, the youth tend to sit on the park bench, and then if there is a McDonald's, that attracts them.
Thank you. Now, the one other thing, do you have, and I accept your comments about the public toilets in Maiden Street being closed because they're unattended and you're looking after the public assets. Are there any open 24/7 public toilets in Weymouth?
There are not, no. There used to be 10 years ago, but due to the sort of escalating issues that happen, the town councils, we have attended ones during the daytime. So our beach ones have an attendant, but that's only till 6 o'clock at night. But overnight, no, we don't have any 24-hour toilets.
And do you get particular complaints from shop owners and retailers and owners of antisocial behaviour of people urinating in the streets?
I've heard complaints. I walk my dog in the morning and step over it. I think everybody in town is aware.
Thank you. I have no more questions at this time. Thank you.
Luke, I respect your comments about stimulating the town centre and such like, but we've also heard that it's really important to utilise space above the retail premises, and that's good to see that happening. A lot of tourists, a lot of towns and cities which depend on tourism do provide, as far as possible, vandal-proof toilets, ones which don't have breakable seats and such like. Would you not consider something in the future for, I know this is not relevant to now, but surely some kind of provision in the future for people to use a toilet facility in the night? The other point I was going to ask is, in your debates about stimulating the town centre and keeping everything vibrant, have you considered the effect of the longer licensed hours for premises and the effect they have on the well-being of people living in the town centre?
I'll try and answer I'll answer both the questions. The first answer is we have just committed to refurbish one of our toilets, which isn't this one, for £120,000 this year, and we've looked to try and put more robust fixtures in. I'm not sure we'll ever be able to open them 24 hours, but certainly we want to try. We want to spend public money wisely and make sure that we do something that won't be easily vandalised. The ones here in Maiden Street are particularly challenging because it's a Grade 2 listed building, so we have to also follow all the planning conditions attached to that to do any work to it. But it's a consideration, but I can't say we would be able to commit to having public toilets. We do rely on premises that are serving food and drink, catering for the products of that. Your second question was about the sort of the impact, or the negative impact of the late night economy. As I tried to allude, or as I said, it's significantly better than it was 10 years ago. I remember I moved to Weymouth in 2012, and I couldn't believe some of the things I saw at 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'm although there are still some venues, there's a very much smaller number still open at that time of night, and things are certainly much better managed than they used to be, and people are dispersing better. And I think the town has a much better reputation than it used to.
Thank you. I'll now go around the room, see if there's any questions for you. Mr. Day, do you have any questions?
Firstly, thank you very much for your input. That's really appreciated. And it's nice to hear from a town council in such detail. Just one question. It's necessary to do a cumulative impact assessment before you can have a cumulative impact policy. I think that the one locally here in Weymouth, or covering Weymouth rather, was last reviewed fairly recently in October 2023. Does the town council have any views to whether, bearing in mind all you said about all these venues closing down or not opening to the full extent of their hours, are you able to say whether the town council has any view about the necessity for a continuing cumulative impact policy?
The town council did resolve to support the continuing for the best of my recollection, the committee resolved to support the continuing community of impact policy on when it was reviewed most recently.
Thank you for that. I've got nothing else.
Thank you. Catherine, do you have any questions?
No, but I can clarify there is a taxi rank opposite.
Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? No. Any questions?
Luke, you mentioned the closet is the one which is open late at night time, which is just round the corner from this proposed application. Are you saying that once this license is approved, there's not going to be any more impact on the neighbors living in that area?
I think that's really a question for the applicant, if I'm honest.
Well, no, I'm just asking for your personal opinion.
My opinion. And additional premises. I mean, there are both pros and cons. I think an opportunity for people to get some chips, etc., may help keep them quiet and help them disperse from the area. But also, the premises being open may mean more people loiter on this corner. So it's 50-50.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm mindful that everybody has had their opportunity to speak and that we have asked the relevant questions that we had. Councillors, do you have any other questions before I ask for summing up?
Sorry.
Mr. Day, Councillor Wakeling raised a comment there about seasonal SIA staff, using them particularly over the summer and perhaps less so in the winter. Do you have a view on that observation, please?
Yes, I do. I entirely agree that what may be appropriate on August Bank Holiday weekend is not going to be the same as on, let's say, January the 3rd, when, after Christmas, everything is pretty well completely dead. And that's part of the reason why we're saying, well, you can't make a hard and fast, or you should not make a hard and fast rule. You could make one, but you shouldn't make one. You need to look at all of the circumstances. Like anything else in life, it needs to be risk assessed. And that's why we proposed it as we did. Now, I would be happy, and perhaps I'll address this rather than answer to a question when I made my closing remarks, be more than happy to look at rewording some of the conditions to take that into account.
Thank you, Mr. Day. John, Mr. Bean, do you have a view on that, the seasonal SIA staff, bearing in mind trying to be fit with everyone?
I would leave it to your good offices, sir, and your two colleagues to decide upon that one. But we do know that Weymouth is busier in the summer months than perhaps in the winter months, but there are obviously certain points during winter, such as when the young farmers appear and we have Christmas and Halloween, when certain requirements would be in place to ensure not only the premises are safe, but also the residents as well.
That's really helpful for me, from all parties, thank you. And I don't know if anybody else has got a view on that, if they have a constructive view. If not, I'll leave it there for the moment.
Thank you. I will now move on to summing up, and I will sum up in reverse order. So I will start with Luke, who is here on behalf of the Town Council. And Luke, do you have anything that you would like to add to summing up? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time and thank you for attending this afternoon. Do you have anything that you would like to add to summing up?
Basically, once this permission is allowed, there are two more small catering outlets which are just with the vicinity of that, 2 doors down one. One is directly opposite, more or less, next to the Gold Lion. It could encourage them to converting to a late night takeaway as well. And then you would lose the whole town centre residential people because nobody would want to live too close to too many takeaways in one head. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shearing, have you got anything that you'd like to add to sum up?
Nothing more than what I've already said, thank you.
Thank you very much. John, do you have anything for summing up?
I would only say that can we please ensure that when we go into recess that we concentrate on 50 St Mary Street and there's no other peripheral items coming to our attention or thoughts.
Yeah, as I've said, we do take each application on its own merit, regardless as to how many other licensed premises might be surrounding them. Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Day.
I've been doing these hearings since 2005. We're always told they should take the form of a discussion and not be combative or anything like that. And I have to say that in terms of a discussion, this is one of the best ones that I've ever had. So thank you to everybody who's come along and so on. And I think, and I stand to be corrected if I've got it wrong, that there is a certain amount of agreement here. And what I invite you to do is to take things step by step. How you approach it is, of course, a matter for you. But I would invite you to firstly say, well, should we grant a license at all? And I think that we are at the point where all of those who have made representations don't actually have a problem with the license being granted. Having amended the hours to match what was suggested in the planning application, I again stand to be corrected if I'm wrong, but I think that everybody is happy. So we then have the question of conditions. Can I invite you to turn to page 96 of your bundle, because there is the what I amended in terms of conditions. And I don't want to go through every single one of them, but the fact of the matter is that it is up to you now to decide what conditions are appropriate and what are not. We're not quite in the situation where, let's suppose there would be no representations, then your licensing officers must grant the application consistent with the operating schedule. But you can come at it with a clean sweep. So what I'm going to invite you to think about is this. Under the heading General, late night refreshments shall only be provided by way of takeaways and deliveries. Its consumption inside the premises will not be permitted. Now, you know why that was offered. As far as my clients are concerned, if you think it appropriate, in the light of what you've heard from the association and the council and everything else, that should be crossed out, then cross it out. The second one, not permitted to consume alcohol on the premises, fine, leave it. Staff working on the premises trained, of course. Digital CCTV, yes, of course, no problem at all. And then we come to the contentious one. The holder of the licence shall undertake a written risk assessment to determine whether or not it's appropriate to deploy SIA registered toilet supervision on any particular days or times, and shall then deploy as may be determined by the outcome. It's got to be reviewed at least once a year following any incident of crime and disorder at or in the near vicinity of the premises or at the request of the police. So they could ask for that to be reviewed the following morning. Copy of the risk assessment provided to the police and the licensing authority on request. I maintain the view that to try and put a blanket condition on this is just not appropriate. And the point has been made now by the Town Council in particular that what may be, sauce for the goose isn't sauce for the gander. What's appropriate in August bank holiday weekends is not going to be appropriate in a cold weekend in February or, dare I say now, even March. I'm not going to go there. I would ask you to please go down that road. It is a sensible road to go down, and I'm perfectly happy for you to perhaps add to it that it's not just a question of it being provided to the police, that the risk assessment should be undertaken in consultation with the police and shall take into account their views. For example, you may even want to put stronger wording in and so on. You may want to say, having particular regard to peak season or when there are events taking place in Weymouth. If it had been a few years ago when you were wonderful hosts to some of the Olympic events down in Weymouth, then very different situation at all, tens of thousands of people descending on the town. Matter for you. The next one, toilets to be closed to the public after 11 p.m. If you want to keep them open, then you could change that on its head. And you could say that the toilets will be available for use by customers at any time the premises are open to the public, for example. We're more than happy to do that. Again, you know why it was offered, but you've got the clean sheet and so on. The public safety ones, I don't think that there are any issue with regard to that. Prevention of public nuisance, I think that the only comment with regard to the proposed conditions here, disposal of empty bottles into waste receptacles outside the premises will not be permitted between 11 and 7. I think it was suggested, matter for you, we don't have a problem with it, that it should be disposals of waste receptacles, regardless of whether they contain bottles or anything else, not to happen between those hours. And again, we don't have a difficulty with that. And then going back to the McDonald's syndrome, children under the age of 18, sorry guys, girls, you can't come in after 11 o'clock. We don't want kids that have been, getting their alcohol from dodgy off licenses or whatever, coming in and causing the sort of problems that McDonald's, a very, very different place, had. I'm not going to remind you of all the other evidence. A fair bit has come out during the hearing, like the taxi rank and things like that. I maintain the position that I did right at the very outset, that actually granting this license is going to solve a couple of problems. It's not certainly going to exacerbate the issues with which cumulative impact are principally concerned. And again, I'm grateful to the Town Council in particular for making the comment about, people eating whilst waiting for their taxis. It might shut them up a bit, it might sober them up a bit, and all of that sort of thing. And I do understand where John Bean is coming from. He has made it clear to us that he had an instruction, and there it is. You take your lead on matters of crime and disorder from the police, but that is very different from saying, thou shalt do exactly what you are told. You take advice from all of the responsible authorities. The ultimate decision is yours, taking this application on its merits. If every other shop in the row decides they want to apply for an all-singing, 24-hour, all-dancing alcohol licence, then you will consider each application on its own merits as and when it is dragged before you. Unless I can assist you further, those are my closing submissions. But thank you for taking the time and trouble to listen so carefully.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fry has a question, if you may.
I noticed you talk about the disposal of empty bottles, possibly waste, if the licence is granted. Into waste outside the premises would not be permitted to take place between the hours of 2300 and 0700 hours. If the licence is granted, are you open and receptive to those hours being changed? I am thinking of residents asleep in their beds at 7 on a Sunday morning, and somebody very keen and enthusiastic goes and empties the bins at 7, or maybe it could be 2200 to 0800.
The age-old problem with this is dealing with waste contractors, and dare I say, particularly where the waste contractor is effectively the local authority. They will go and empty their bins whenever they like. What this condition was all about was the premises themselves not emptying the bottles and so on from inside into bins outside. It doesn't dictate at what time the contractor comes along and then empties the bins. But in terms of taking stuff out from the premises into the bin, yeah, I mean, again, it's a matter entirely for you. But what I wouldn't want you to please do is to restrict the hours at which bins can be emptied. I mean, you know, I live across the border in Hampshire, and I can tell you that the chap who comes and empties our glass recycling bins, they turn up about 5:30 in the morning, and there's nothing we can do about it. That's it. You want them emptied? It's going to be 5:30 in the morning. It's a blooming nuisance. Fortunately, they only come once a month. But there it is.
I have some sympathy because the residential home next to us, they pick up their bins at 5:45 in the morning regularly. But I'm looking here, and this is disposal of waste, but on the premises, I'm seeing the staff. So if that was conditioned slightly differently, you wouldn't have a problem with that.
Of course not. No, we wouldn't.
I think no.
The talk of the taxi rank has actually flagged up another slight issue with me, if that's okay, just to run it by you. Obviously, people will have the drink, they'll buy the takeaway, they'll wait for a taxi, the taxi driver says, right, you're not bringing that in there, and some people who might be irresponsible would dump their half-empty containers around about. Would you take seriously your responsibility to clear that area of your particular litter at the end of the day?
If you thought it appropriate for a condition to require the premises to do a litter sweep of their own rubbish, please. You know, we don't want them picking up from every Tom, Dick and Harry's shop and chewing gum wrappers and discarded cigarette butts and so on, but their own waste, which obviously is branded and all the rest of it. And again, if you want to write in a condition that says you've got to do that when you close every night, then yeah, that's fine.
It is something that over the years I've come across, and different places have gone even further than that. But with the taxi rank opposite, it is something that is going to occur whether we like it or not, and I think that's appropriate.
Thank you. Mr. Day, did you have anything else for summing up?
No, I'm happy to answer any other points if there are any, but no, that's me done.
Thank you very much. Catherine?
No, I have nothing to add, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'd like to thank you all for attending this afternoon and for your time. What we will do now, we will retire to make our decision. When we've made our decision will be sent out to you. That will come out to you via email, and everybody that has made, obviously the applicants, anybody that's made a representation will get a copy of that email. That email can come out anything up to 5 working days. Once you've received the decision notice, obviously have a good read of it. Obviously there is a right of appeal, and your right of appeal is within 21 days of receiving the written decision notice. and your right of appeal will be to Weymouth Magistrates Court. Are you all content with that? Okay, brilliant. We have no exempt business, so I will now close this meeting, and again, I'd like to thank you all for your attendance. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.